Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is dash. Let's take a look at some of the definitions or the ways that we use this verb. The first way you might hear dash used is to mean to run or travel somewhere in a great hurry. So you might hear things like somebody saying they're going to dash to the store. So that would imply kind of a quick trip. They're not planning on spending the whole day shopping. This is going to leave and be back rather fast. A second way you might hear dash used is to mean to throw something with great force in order to destroy. So I feel like I've seen this verb used when I've read literature, and the writer, the author, is trying to describe someone who's very angry and who throws something in order to destroy it. A third way you might hear dash used is to mean to come into forceful contact with something. So here you might kind of think of like hit. Okay. And again, this many times it's not an accident or something that isn't painful, right? It's really going to leave a mark, might be a good way to think of it. A fourth way dash gets used is to refer to the action of destroying someone's hopes or their expectations. So here, kind of, you might think of things in the future, what they want to do, what they expect to do, and having that idea kind of ruined or destroyed. A fifth way you might hear dash used is to mean to cause someone to lose confidence. So this verb might be used in reaction to something else that has happened, or maybe some words that have been said that cause a person to kind of feel like, I can't do this, or I'm not good at this. You should know that dash is a regular verb. To make the progressive form of this verb, all I need to do is add ing to form dashing. The past tense and participle forms of this verb can be made by adding ed. Our base verb, dash, ends in an unvoiced sh sound. This means that our past tense ending is going to make a t sound. So it should sound like this: dashed, dashed. Okay. Now, there are a few phrasal verbs that are used in connection to dash. Let's begin looking at some of them now. The first you might encounter is to dash against. This is going to tie back to one of our earlier definitions where we're talking about throwing something against something else. So throwing one object and having it hit or strike something else. An example of this might be, she dashed the picture frame against the wall. Right? So in anger, maybe she's mad at someone who's in the picture or in the photograph with her, and so she throws it against the wall because she's quite upset. Another phrasal verb you might encounter is to dash away. Generally, this means to run away. So we're talking about kind of moving quickly. Now, when I say run away, I don't mean permanently by any means, but really just leaving one place and going to another. An example of this: the children have dashed away to the park. Right? So they will be returning, but it just implies they ran off rather quickly towards the park. Another phrasal verb you might encounter is to dash down. Many times this is used to talk about writing something very quickly, making a note of some kind. An example of this: I'll dash down a few notes while I'm thinking about it. Okay? Now, I want to note, I think this is something that would have been more common to hear many years ago in the past. I really kind of racked my brain for instances where I've heard people use dash down. And again, they tend to come from people from an earlier generation than mine. Another phrasal verb you might encounter is to dash off. This can have a couple different meanings. One would just be to leave someplace rather quickly. An example of this: he's dashing off to an appointment. Right? So maybe some team member, a coworker is sort of quickly leaving the office. A second way to use dash off is to mean to do or make something rather quickly. So I think this, again, tends to be used a lot with baking and with writing. And so I used a baking example here. We're going to dash some cupcakes off for tomorrow's party. So this isn't something I'm going to spend a lot of time doing, but I'm trying to make something quickly to bring to this gathering. Another phrasal verb you might encounter is to dash out. This can also mean to leave a place quickly. An example of this might be, I dashed out for some milk and eggs before the snowstorm started. So I didn't have kind of a long-running plan. I wasn't being sort of thorough. I left the house really quickly. I realized, oh, we don't have milk and eggs, and we're going to be snowed in for a few days. Another phrasal verb you might hear is to dash over. Generally, this is used to describe someone making a quick visit to another person or some other place. An example of this, Grandma dashed over to watch the kids for a short time. Okay, so maybe a parent had an emergency, right? Can you quickly come over, help me out for 30 minutes? Something like that. That could be the quick visit. Many times we're using this where there isn't a lot of planning going into that particular moment. Now let's continue using our verb of the day dash in a couple different tenses. Today we'll practice the imperative and the present progressive. Let's start with the imperative. The imperative is rather unique in English because we do not have stated subjects. The subject is always implied. It's either you singular or you plural, depending on how many people you're communicating with. So when we make a positive sentence or an affirmative sentence in the imperative, I just start with the base verb. You can see that in my example here. Dash over to the neighbor's house and borrow a stick of butter. Okay. Now here, maybe I'm talking to a family member. I've realized, we don't have this, but we're very close friends and it's fine to kind of ask our neighbor for this thing. So I'm telling them, leave quickly, come back. Okay. Now, sometimes using the imperative and telling someone to do a particular action can seem maybe a little too forceful or perhaps a little rude. We can always soften this command by using please. So we're just making it a bit more polite. I can put please at the beginning of my sentence, or I could put please at the end, but I don't need it in both places. One at the beginning or two at the end. Either one is fine. Now, if I want to make a negative imperative sentence, so here I'm telling someone not to do something, then I want to start with do not and then the base verb, or the contraction don't and then the base verb. You can see that in the example sentence, don't dash my dreams with bad news. Right? So it goes back to that definition talking about destroying someone's hopes or their expectations. Okay? So here they might be saying, don't tell me bad things that are going to ruin or destroy this particular dream that I have. Now, let's talk about the present progressive. Many teachers and books call this the present continuous, and that's fine. They mean the exact same thing. I like using present progressive because I try and help my students remember that we're going to need two parts to make our verb. So we need the present form of be, and then we need the ing form of the verb. And we're using this verb tense many times to talk about something that is happening right now, or we're describing an action that is in progress during a time period that hasn't been completed yet. An example of this might be an asteroid is dashing towards Earth. Right? So here we might think kind of traveling quickly, moving towards us. And there are usually stories about this quite frequently. So in this affirmative sentence, I think you can see present form is, because I'm just talking about one thing, right? And then I have that ing form of the verb. Now, if I want to make a negative present progressive sentence, I'm going to have my subject, I'll have my form of be, so am, is, or are, then I'll have not, and then the ing form the verb. Here's another example. They aren't dashing off to do their homework, right? So here, maybe we have a parent or a babysitter kind of describing here what isn't happening right now. Okay, so maybe the kids are eating snacks, they're playing a game, but they're not sort of running off to do their homework. Finally, let's look at making a yes or no question in the present progressive. To do this, we start with our present form of be. So again, am, is, or are. Then we have our subject, and we want our subject to match with that form of be. Then you'll see the ing form of the verb. Here's another example. Are you dashing upstairs? You might hear that if you work for an organization, maybe that has multiple floors, offices on multiple floors, and somebody wants you to take something up to the next floor, right? So kind of implying, are you making that quick trip upstairs? Okay. Now let's spend a little time looking at some words that are related to our verb dash. And the first word we're going to discuss today is just the noun form of this word. So the noun dash has the exact same spelling and the exact same pronunciation. It can have a number of different meanings. I think we're going to talk about 5 today. So the first way we use the noun dash is to refer to the act of running somewhere rather suddenly or quickly. So again, the idea here is not a lot of planning. An example of this. They made a dash to the door when the fire alarm sounded. So maybe this wasn't a planned drill, right? So we're kind of talking about them getting up and moving or running towards the door. A second way you hear dash used is to refer to short, fast races. So you might think of the word sprint. That's used quite often. So an example of this, she's competing in the 100-meter dash. Okay? Sometimes we'll hear that in connection to track events. A third way to use the noun dash is to refer to a small quantity of some substance. Many times this is used with liquids, like in my example sentence, add a dash of vinegar to the dressing. Right? So just a little bit, a small amount of vinegar. Another way to use the noun dash is to refer to the horizontal stroke in writing or printing that marks some type of pause or break. So I've used one here in my example sentence. The worker yelled, "I think I'm fall." 8. So this mark here would be an example of a dash. It's sort of noting the speaker's voice stopped or can't be heard at this point. Okay. You might see that as you engage in more reading. A fifth way to use the noun dash is to just refer to some small amount of a particular quality or characteristic. An example of this. This room needs a dash of color. So maybe we have very sort of gray walls, gray carpet, and you're thinking like, oh, it needs a little amount. A pop of color might be another way you'll hear it used. Now, another related word you might encounter is the adjective dashing. So this can be used to describe something or someone that is stylish or fashionable. It might also be used to describe someone who is attractive, adventurous, or full of confidence. I think in most examples, dashing gets used to describe men versus women, but you can always use the word however you see fit. So an example of this, his dashing appearance sparked many comments on social media. So here we could be talking about someone that many people find attractive or full of confidence, could be referring to the style or the fashion of clothing this particular person was wearing. I chose this sentence because I thought it connected really to all parts of the definition. Now, one more related word I'm sure many people encounter, the dashboard. This noun can also be used in a couple different ways. The way I think you're most likely to hear it used is in connection to cars. So generally this is going to be the panel in a car that faces a driver. You'll hear dashboard also used in connection to airplanes, helicopters, etc. There are many instruments, many controls in this sort of area or part of the vehicle. An example of this: some people decorate and personalize their car dashboards, right? So maybe you've seen this, different things kind of get stuck or attached just to give it a bit of personality. Now, a second way you might encounter dashboard is many times in connection to other software or programs. So many times this looks like a graph. Right? So you might see different charts, different pieces of data in order to share important information. An example of this: the software's new reporting and dashboard tools allow us to organize information. So many companies may have internal software, internal sites that sort of allow us to see, like, how are we performing? How are we doing? Thanks so much for watching today's video. I hope you have a great day.